The Profile. You're listening to Premier Christian Radio.
Where faith comes to life.
Hello and welcome to The Profile here on Premier Christian Radio. I'm Sam Hales, editor of Premier Christianity magazine. That's the magazine that sponsors this show and makes it all possible. And each and every week here on The Profile, we're interviewing a different Christian about their life, faith and testimony. Later on today, I will be speaking to the worship leader and church leader, Tim Hughes, not just about Gas Street, Birmingham and about worship, but also about COVID-19, how it's affected the church and how we should be thinking about opening up again when this pandemic finally ends, and all the implications theologically and for us as Christians. So lots to discuss with Tim Hughes coming up later on. But before we get there, we wanted to bring you a special show which originally aired over the Easter period. This is a quite remarkable and unusual story we're bringing you today. So I'm going to pass over to Julia Fisher, who is presenting the first section of the show, and she's been in conversation with Terri Goodyear. Let's listen in.
Hello, this is Julia Fisher, and in this special Easter programme I'll be considering the question of reconciliation. We often hear the words, "For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life." But you may be asking, what if I've done something so bad God couldn't possibly forgive me? For example, what if I'd murdered my husband? Well, Terri Goodyear did just that. 20 years ago, whilst very drunk, she stabbed her husband John, and he died a few hours later. Terri served not only a prison sentence for her crime, but she also served another, longer sentence of not being able to forgive herself, yet alone believe that God could forgive her. But today, several years later, she has found peace of mind and been able to rebuild her shattered life. She was born in the East End of London, a true Cockney, and one of two children from a happy and stable family background. Listening to her story, you'll quickly realise she didn't much enjoy school. In fact, she couldn't wait to leave and get out to work.
Bit rebellious, like most people my age. I was just glad. I just couldn't wait to leave school. When the time came to leave school, I was at that door because I knew, well, I'd already had a job to start doing hairdressing, which is my trade. But that wasn't my first option. My first option was acting. But my father wasn't impressed with actors or actresses, so he put me off, really.
So you went into hairdressing?
Yeah.
How did you meet your husband?
In a disco, because I loved dancing.
Did you know him well?
Not at the beginning. I didn't really like him much. I thought, because I didn't realise at that time that he just was getting over and recovering from a very serious accident. So he had a lot of scars and a very bad limp at the time. So I thought he was a bit of a gangster. So my impression of him wasn't very good at the time. So, but then I got to know him and we started to go out on a regular basis. Every week we'd go out. And then the relationship grew. And we started to become a couple. And it grew from there. And then we got engaged. I mean, we're talking in the 60s, and the courtships in those days were quite long. I mean, it's not like today. They meet and immediately it all happens, doesn't it? But in those days, we went out for a long time.
So you knew him quite well before you married him?
Yes, we did, yeah. We knew each other quite well.
You knew who you were marrying?
Oh, yeah. Lovely guy. A lovely personality. He was a real gentleman. He knew how to treat a woman. He would open doors. He would help you on with your coat, pull out chairs. He was a real gentleman, and he had a brilliant sense of humour. So all the qualities I looked for a man, he had. So, yeah, we gelled very well together.
So what went wrong?
We got married, and I wanted a big family. I don't know why, but I just loved children. And we started to live with his mum. I mean, because his dad died and left him a fairly big place, and I wasn't eager to live with in-laws. I mean, I'm not an in-law type of person then. But because I wanted to please him, I thought, yeah, okay, we'll give it a try for a year, and it didn't work out. And in that year, we were trying for children, but nothing was happening. And normally when you come off a pill, because I was on the pill, you normally fall pregnant straight away, and I didn't. So I went and had some tests and found that I had a blocked tube. The operation went wrong. Everything went wrong after that. A lot of things happened, obviously, with families. When you have family problems, you tend to suppress them in drink or in other areas or in other ways. I turned to drink more. I mean, I did like a drink, but I found that drink helped me to keep my emotions, what I thought were in control. And I thought like the answer would be at the bottom of the bottle, and it isn't.
So, after a relatively short time of being married then, you found you couldn't have children.
That's right.
You were
Yeah.
heartbroken.
Yeah, I was very disappointed, because it seems when you really want something and you look around, there was babies everywhere. Everywhere I looked, there was couples having babies. When I went in that operation, there was people in there having babies. And, you know, you think, well, I only want I mean, I was even got to the point where one baby would do. I was that desperate to have children, and even that wasn't happening. And John was the type of person that if he couldn't have his own children, he definitely wasn't going to adopt anybody else's. So that option, which I was trying to go down, was out the window. So I was quite depressed at the time.
Would you say that you became an alcoholic?
Yeah, I was on the verge of becoming an alcoholic because I was drinking quite a lot, had a lot of family problems, and John's work was folding up. It was as though everything that I dreamed about and wanted was slowly grinding to a halt, and it was all out of my control. But saying that, I had a very good Christian friend at the time who I'd met years before I'd met John, who had given me the gospel, and I'd always kept in touch with her. So I used to pour my heart out to her, tell her my problems, and I don't know, she just had something special.
But nevertheless, things got worse before they got
did.
better.
Yeah, they certainly did.
What happened?
Just the fateful evening was, I mean, we always had company back at our place. It was just the done thing. They'd always come back to Terri and John's, either for a late drink in the evenings or weekends. We always had company. And it was on this particular day, we'd gone to our local pub like we did every Sunday. We had company back at our place that had dinner, more drink. And then we went back to the pub in that evening, and it was during the course of that time. And at this point, I don't remember a lot because I was at that point where I'd gone past oblivion. And apparently we were sitting in the corner talking in depth. And then John left the pub. And the next minute I was making my way out of the pub. I got into my car and I proceeded to drive out of the car park and drive myself home in that state. It's an absolute miracle, really, that I even got home.
So, Terri, you got home. It must have been quite late by then. You'd had dinner, you'd been out to the pub, you were very drunk.
Yeah.
What happened when you got home?
I don't remember much after that. I mean, I remember John, he was laying on the settee, and I remember him sitting up and telling me that I'd stabbed him. I mean, this is a man that I loved and worshipped. I mean, I just worshipped the ground he walked on, and for him to face me with that statement that I'd stabbed him, and I knew by his face that it was true. I mean, you just know by the look of a person's face that the statement they've made is not funny, it's the truth. And I remember turning around, immediately phoning for help, phoning the police. And the next minute, there was just all people coming in, police, ambulance. And that would be the last time I would see John.
Why were you so angry with him? Were you angry with him?
I must have been, because it's accumulation of disappointments over the short time. Mummy was married for 3 years, and all the dreams that I had about married life, because I'm very much into marriage, 100% working, so all the dreams that you want for yourself were just evaporating. And the frustrations, disappointments, mixture of drink, and they just evaporated.
gradually sobered up and the awful reality of what you had done came home.
Yeah, I mean, I was taken. It wasn't until I was taken to the local police station and put into a cell, then I realised what I'd done, and I thought, well, that's it, the marriage is over now. And, you know, you're trying to go through the day, what happened? You know, I couldn't understand what had happened. Why would I have stabbed him? What was the reason?
Did he die immediately?
No, he didn't. It wasn't until the early hours of the morning the police came and told me. Oh, it was awful. I mean, because I could hear the footsteps coming down the corridor and the door opening and them the police just making a statement that Mrs. Goodyear, come to tell you that your husband died 3 o'clock this morning. And I thought, oh, I was just devastated, and they just shut the door and left me. And in that time, the devastation turned to shock, and it was as though I'd been plunged into a bucket of ice. Well, my emotions had just evaporated out of me.
Were you held in custody before
Yes.
the trial?
I was for a short time. When I was given a statement, I didn't call for my mum and dad or anybody but my friend who'd witnessed to me about Jesus, because I know then, at that time, I know that only she could help me. And I was held in custody for a short time, charged with murder, and then taken to Holloway Prison. And that's when my friend came and visited me.
You then had to go to court, presumably, and you were
Yes.
sentenced.
Yeah.
How long were you in prison?
I got 3 years, which in itself was a miracle, because the murder charge was reduced to manslaughter, and through manslaughter, I mean, I could have got longer. I really could have got a lot longer, but I didn't. I got 3 years, which was an incredible miracle in itself. And from that, I got a parole after 13 months.
Presumably, though, Terry, prison life must have been a very uncomfortable and very unhappy experience for you.
It's very frightening, because you have got no idea what prison life is like. I mean, even walking into reception can be very humiliating when you're signed in, and obviously they have to make sure there's, you know, if you've got any scars on your body or tattoos, so you have to strip naked, and it's very humiliating. And you don't know what's going on. I mean, I was still in a state of shock. I'd not long come off a medication. Still wasn't quite all together with the whole system. And then just placed into a cell. And there I began my sentence.
You became a Christian. How did that happen?
When I was in the first custody, when I was very first taken into custody, and I called for my friend, because she'd only ever witnessed to me and hadn't gone any further than witnessing, you know, about prayer and receiving Jesus as your saviour. All I remember her doing was when she came to Holloway, and she only had a 5 minutes, and this 5 minutes was so precious because God worked a miracle in that 5 minutes. She kept telling me how God loved me and forgave me, God's forgiveness, and to accept him. I can't remember all the conversations, but I can always remember the anxiety on her face. She was so anxious for me to get hold of what she was saying to me. Now, she's talking to me, and I'm in the pits of despair. I'm in the pits of the pits. But I knew by a look on her face that what she was saying was the most important thing I needed to get hold of. So when I went back to my cell, I didn't say any special prayer because I didn't know how to pray. But I just said, well, here I am. Take over, and that was it.
So the depression that you were enveloped by must have been like a fog.
That's right, it was.
It was so dark. Something started to happen.
Yeah, there was no... I mean, for me, I just felt the same. There was no fireworks or angels singing at all, because I was still in... I mean, obviously I was grieving for John and still can't get to grips of what I've done. But I got 7 months bail, which was also another miracle. The 7 months was the time when I really come into great revelation of God's love. And also at that time, the friends that I had all left, rejected me. So I'd not only lost the man I loved, I'd lost the friends as well. So I was totally on my own. I'd lost everything, even my home. But the 7 months was very precious, because at that time, my friend and all of her church that prayed that I would get bail were able to love me, pray for me, and bring me back into that place of getting my mind back, because I was in a state of turmoil, and
You must have hated yourself, Terri.
oh, I couldn't believe I'd done it. I couldn't believe that I could have done such a terrible thing to somebody I love so much.
So you served your sentence. You came out. To bring the story up to date, what are you doing now?
At the moment, I'm working.
Have you been able to rebuild your life?
Yes, I have. Yeah, I mean, all that you lose in life, with God, God's replaced everything. He's given me a new home. He's given me new friends. He's actually rebuilt me as a person. He's put me back together again. He mended the broken heart that I had and all my emotions. He's restored. He's given me new friends.
Do you feel forgiven?
Oh, yeah. I do now, but it took me a long time. It took me many years to feel that. Because I think most of the time when you do something as bad as that, you find it hard to believe that God can forgive you and to forgive myself. And I remember a friend of mine saying that you can't, if God has forgiven you, how can you not forgive yourself? That's sort of like smacking God in the face, really, saying you're not good enough to forgive. And it was from that day on that I began to receive that forgiveness. It wasn't easy.
Terri, you've come to accept that God has forgiven you. You've learnt to forgive yourself.
Yes.
But presumably there are people who still feel very bitter towards you. How have you coped with that?
Yes, at the very beginning I found that very hard. But as time has gone on and I've grown in the Lord, I can understand that, because if I wasn't saved myself, if I was in the same position as those people that haven't got forgiveness for me, I'd be the same. I would be exactly the same. I wouldn't forgive anybody that had taken someone away from me in an act of killing them. So I accept that. And I just pray that someday that they would come to an understanding of the love of God, or even receive Jesus as their saviour, so that they can understand. Because anger, unforgiveness causes so many other things within you. It can bring on so many different illnesses, and it just brings death, really. So I can understand that.
Holier than thou.
Radical.
Delusional.
Ignorant.
Perfect. It's time to challenge stereotypes about Christians, and Premier Christianity is leading the way.
Transform your perceptions. Broaden your horizons. Open your mind to wide-ranging views.
Read interviews with politicians, theologians, and TV presenters.
Discover the breadth of the Christian spectrum.
Be provoked, react, inspired, and informed. Get the print magazine and full online access for just £4.95 a month. Subscribe today at premierchristianity.com.
Premier Christianity Magazine.
The bigger picture.
The Profile.
You're listening to Premier Christian Radio.
Where faith comes to life.
Hello and welcome to The Profile here on Premier Christian Radio. I am Sam Hales, editor of Premier Christianity Magazine. That's the UK's leading Christian mag, and we publish interviews, reviews. We've got some fantastic columnists, Rain Collectives, Chris Llewellyn, Jeff Lucas, Sarah Lumgare and more. And it's that magazine that sponsors this show. Premier Christianity magazine. Why not subscribe now and get full online access plus the monthly print magazine? The latest offer is available right now at premierchristianity.com. That's a brand new website we just launched a couple of weeks ago, premierchristianity.com. So why not check that out? You're about to hear my conversation with the worship leader and church leader, Tim Hughes. Tim Hughes is a leader at Gas Street Church in Birmingham. He's also well known for penning a variety of worship songs, including Happy Day, Here I Am to Worship, Beautiful One, Jesus Saves, God of Justice, Be My Everything, and so much more. And while we do touch on the subject of worship, not least because Tim Hughes has a brand new book out called Why Worship, but we're also talking about issues related to church and COVID-19. For the past year, many churches across the country have not been meeting physically, but instead have been live streaming their services over YouTube or holding Zoom meetings. And of course, as government regulations change, there have been variances to that. But as a general rule, a lot of churches have taken to using online media in a fresh way. And I wanted to ask Tim about what that's meant for him personally at Gas Street Church, but also what that means for worship and what church leaders should be thinking about as we head into the future. So there's all that and more coming up in this conversation with Tim Hughes. Tim is a previous guest on The Profile, and if you want to hear past interviews we've done with him, just head to The Profile as a podcast. You can access it now at premierchristianradio.com/The Profile, or just search for The Profile wherever you normally get your podcasts from. I should say this interview has already been published in Premier Christianity magazine as well, so you can access it that way too. All right, without any further ado, let's listen to my conversation with the worship leader and church leader, Tim Hughes.
Hi, great to be with you.
It's great to chat. Last time we connected, we were talking about the UK blessing, and
Yes.
I think at the time it had just hit 1 million views. I mean, goodness knows how many millions it's now on YouTube.
Yeah.
Just reflecting back on that, quite a remarkable moment, wasn't it, where a worship song really did go viral. I mean, I can't remember a song going viral online to that extent in recent years. Now that we've got some distance for a few months, what's your reflections on that?
Yeah, I mean, it was took us all by surprise. I mean, I think you hoped it would connect with people, but not on the scale which it did. I think it's really hard to kind of grapple with this stuff, but there was a sense of God's Spirit resting on it. And I think what happened is, obviously, it captured the unity, all these different streams, denominations, people, ages, gender, coming together to sing these beautiful words, this blessing. I think, God says he commands a blessing when brothers and sisters dwell in harmony. There's something of that. But I think God just used it to minister encouragement to people. And as I said at the time, and just heard this more and more, also increasingly from people who wouldn't, say that they had a faith, finding themselves weeping as they watched it. And I think there was something of, just God connecting with people, that message that I love you, my heart is for you. And so I think God just used it to encourage people at a time of real challenge and testing. Yeah. So it's been really special to see how God's used it.
It's like this one thing that we as Christians loved and were even known for, this one thing of singing, was ripped away from us almost, a whole year ago now, really.
Yeah.
And sung worship really has not been the same. I just want to boil this down though to how this works out practically. So you've got a lot of churches now where a worship band or a worship leader will still go to the building and they will be filmed, and then there'll be people at home watching on a TV screen. So you're a pastor, you're a church leader. Is your encouragement to your congregation at home, stand up, lift your hands, respond in the usual kind of way? Is that what you're urging people into, almost kind of replicating what they'd normally do on a Sunday, or do you see it differently? How does that work?
Well, it's a bit of both. I think that there's a real encouragement that needs to happen around. Don't just sit back and watch. We're not watching Downton Abbey, or I don't know what you're into, Sam. But this isn't a chance just to sort of consume.
Yeah.
We are here to worship, and it's just reframing it. We are the people of God. Church is always about being a family. Church isn't about watching something. It's about connecting together. We have this gift of technology that means I might be sat in my living room here in Birmingham, and you're the other side of Birmingham in your bedroom, but we're still, by the Spirit of God, connected together. and we're going to worship. And I want to encourage you. You know, we will often say, "Why don't you stand?" Just to shift people away from the sitting back and what and sing. And then this is the thing that we've loved seeing. We've really encouraged, and it's been brilliant. Is we predominantly stream through YouTube, and then you've got all the comments you can have. And so we run our gatherings now live. So we'll encourage, put a comment up, worship emoji, or what do you feel God's saying, or what are you experiencing? And actually, when you're gathered together, you hear people singing together. So that's the sense of this congregation, we're in it together. But actually, through the comments, you can see, so so-and-so's put a little prayer emoji up, and you're reminded that, that person's a part of our community. And another person said, I got a new job this week. And it's like, yes, praise God, well done, And so we're actually connecting in worship through the comments that go up. So we've been encouraging that, and then also feeding those in and allowing that to lead our worship as well. So that's how we've tried to encourage community.
That's great to hear, and our church has done very similarly with that. At the same time, my own personal feeling is that while that stuff is great, personally, I don't feel like it's enough in the sense that it's what we'd be used to if we were physically in the same building. But this opens up the debate, doesn't it, of when all this is over, do we need to really lean into physical gatherings still matter, even if we still do the whole digital online thing? Have you thought much about that?
Well, just two things. I mean, the first thing, and I've been saying this for a little while, I think one of the roles of a worship pastor, and I don't think we talk about this anywhere near enough, is not just to lead a great set of worship on a Sunday, it's to curate a culture of worshipers who actually Monday on the way to work are finding their hearts filled with thanksgiving. And, when something wonderful happens, their response is, Jesus, thank you, I love you. As they're on a walk, they're kind of just enjoying a sense of God's presence with them. That's what we need to do. And I think when we just sing the biggest and the best 4 songs out in the world every week, I don't know if we're doing that. So one of the things I want to, and we're having to do this in this season of, actually, you've got to learn to take responsibility for your own worshiping life and expression. You've got to be someone who finds ways to read the word and to think about who God is and to find ways of expressing that. So I do think this has been really important in terms of a discipleship thing of, you can't just enjoy the big thrill of a big gathering. We've got to take responsibility for our own worship. That said, I do think if from the Bible I read, even the fact, that Jesus, the incarnation, he stepped in to the mess of humanity. He rubbed shoulders with people. He connected. They would sing together. They would break bread together. They would eat together. I think some of the teaching I'm hearing about, the church is going to shift everything online. I would feel very, very nervous of that. I think technology and online is a brilliant tool, but you cannot be being face to face with people. And I think also, worship isn't simply this kind of vertical us and God. When we worship as a family, we're encouraging one another in our worship. That's why it talks about in Ephesians, we're bringing a psalm, a hymn, a spiritual song. That's what worship should do. Our worship, we should be feeding one another in our worship. And so I think the gathered expression, however big or small that is really, really important. Because what I love about when I worship is I look around and think, I'm a part of this with a whole bunch of friends and family, and look at this eclectic group, and we're here together saying, Jesus, your Lord. Again, there's something spiritual and powerful that happens there. And this reminder of, we're in this together. I'm not alone. I'm not alone. And I think that's such an important part of our worship. We're not worshiping alone. Again, when we talk about this in the book, when we gather to worship, we're gathering with the heavens who are already worshiping, the 4 living creatures, the 24 elders, the thousands upon thousands, multitudes of angels. And actually, we need to just shift our thinking from it's my little moment with God to, gosh, we're part of this cosmic expression of heaven and earth gathering together before Jesus, the one who's worthy.
We actually just this month at Premier Christianity magazine, our new front cover is quite something, if I may say so myself. Obviously, I didn't design it; the designer did. But it's based on some of those visions in Ezekiel and Revelation of these winged creatures covered in eyes.
Wow.
It's all we've done that cover because Matt Redman, who as you know is a good friend of yours and has written many Christian worship songs, he's written a piece for us about the holiness of God and specifically about worship. Matt Redman says in the piece that without that holiness of God, you can't even call it worship. As you say, we need to understand and capture this majesty of God. I mean, Matt went quite far in the piece in saying that some of our worship songs have been a bit too me focused, which I thought was quite a challenging thing for someone who's written so many worship songs to kind of own up to, really, and say, have we gone a bit wrong on this? What was your reaction in reading that article through?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that there's a fair critique. I mean, I think what I'm seeing in our church, the songs that really are connecting are the songs that they just tell the story of what Jesus has done on the cross, death and resurrection, glorious ascension, the promise of his return. Those songs of truth are the things that actually they anchor us, they're foundations to build our lives upon. I do think there's a really important and special place in our worship of this is me coming before you, God, bringing all that I am, experiencing all that you are, the place of intimacy. And I think that's what, Matt and I both grew up through Soul Survivor, and it's always been such a key part. It's the friendship and the fear.
Yeah.
It's the awe and the intimacy. And that's the beautiful mystery of the Christian faith. It's the only faith that actually you can know and be loved and cherished by the creator of the heavens and the earth. We're not killing ourselves to try and please and impress him.
Yeah.
But I do think the church needs to regain a sense of the otherness, the power, the transcendence of God. Again, it began. I think when we begin to reclaim holiness in our worship, we begin to regain a sense of, our lives need to be biblically based. So many we're being shifted by culture, being led by what feels maybe right. Where actually no, we're a Jesus-centered people, and we've got to be a Bible-based people. And so I think these themes of holiness, again, we've seen this a lot in our church, repentance. I think because of this pandemic, a real shaking, there's a sense of God, we want to get right with you. And we're seeing areas where we've got casual and apathetic and compromised. And I feel like the more we've been teaching, we're in a series on Revelation, the more we're teaching about centrality of Christ and surrender and reverence, people are engaging and responding. So I do think there's a lot to be learned from reclaiming holiness in our worship.
Yeah. Your book is called Why Worship, which is a massive question. I imagine there's lots and lots and lots of different answers to that. And obviously people will have to buy the book to find out all the answers.
Absolutely.
But is there one or two, I'm particularly interested in any answers that perhaps people may not be expecting that might catch us by surprise, or just a fresh angle on the answer to that question?
The book has these themes and threads, who is it that we worship? How do we worship? What happens when we worship? I think one of the things I keep coming back to is, there's obviously that we're created, we're designed for worship, for this relationship with God. He was perfect, God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, unity, community. And yet out of the overflow of that, he wanted the people to enjoy and share with him in that. So there's a huge amount of that. I think one of the other things that runs through the book, and different authors, Graham Kendrick and Dr. Darrell Johnson and Lou Fellingham and Noel Robinson and Dr. Helen Morris, others, but this real importance that worship is transformational. To worship is to change. And I actually kind of end the book. There's this radio interview back during the Second World War from William Temple, who was the Archbishop of Canterbury at the time. And he said that this world can be changed this world can be saved from political chaos and collapse by one thing, and that is the worship of Jesus Christ. And I just love that vision. Now, he's not saying a song about Jesus can change the world, but actually a people putting Jesus first, living lives that just overflow out of the celebration and joy of who he is, that lead to radical discipleship and holiness, completely different way of thinking around sexuality and around money and around care for those in need and around purity, all of these different things. That begins to change not only us, but the world around us. So I think, and again, there are so many organizations that can do incredible things in terms of social justice, but it's the church that actually puts Jesus into that question. You know, amazing to care for your physical needs, but you have eternal needs, and you have a deep ache in your heart that can be filled by the person of Jesus Christ. So I think that theme of just the wild transformation that comes out of worship is very strong.
Do you think that we as Christians are having to become more and more used to sort of standing out? You mentioned this just now about, I think you mentioned passing things like sexuality, but lots of other things where actually, if you're going to say, yeah, I follow Jesus, and yeah, I follow the Bible, and yeah, I'm not going to go on what culture thinks, but I'm actually dedicated to this man, Jesus. It's like nowadays in 2021, if that's your position, you are probably going to stand out from the culture a little bit more than you did even 20, 30 years ago. Are you finding that just pastorally and trying to help people through this and say, look, following Jesus is not the easy route on this stuff. You're actually going to have to believe some things, stand up for some things, maybe even lose some friends over positions you're taking. Is that something that you think's beginning to dawn on people a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, we're in this series on Revelation, and I was just speaking on the letter to the church in Smyrna, and it's only 2 of the letters Jesus never offers a rebuke. And this is one of them. And basically, they are under incredible pressure, persecution, because they won't say Caesar is Lord. They're poor because businesses won't employ them, because they are offending the people of Rome because of their worship of Jesus. And physically, they are up against it. They're struggling. And Jesus says, "No, I'm going to sweep in and sort it all out for you." He says, "Be faithful unto death." Yeah. And he says, I see your poverty, but you're rich. You know, there's a crown of life coming. So I do think there's an eternal perspective. And I do think following Jesus should be costly. You know, following Jesus should lead us to being misunderstood, and that's painful. I mean, following Jesus is, how do we love people, care for people, be really sensitive and kind and merciful to people? But ultimately, what are we anchoring our way of living on? The world or the words of Jesus Christ? And I think it is one or the other.
I think there's a temptation for again, both worship leaders and church leaders. There can be a temptation just to really look forward to kind of quote unquote getting back to normal, right? Of us all being in one room together, and we all long for that. Of course we do. Yeah. At the same time, I think leaders are recognizing God wants us to learn in this season, and so we shouldn't just crave what came before. The $1 million question, of course, is okay, but practically, what might that mean?
No clear answers. I mean, I think one of the things we look at this in the book, Why Worship. There's in West Sussex, in a state called Knepp, it's 3,500 acre estate, and in 2001, after years of kind of intensively farming the land, you know, they were struggling financially, and they just kind of slightly at the end of themselves. And so they embarked on this project called rewilding, where basically you just let everything grow. You know, the ecosystem just goes where it needs to go, and much freedom as possible. And what they found over the years of not really farming or watching the land is all of this incredible life. You know, so many new species came back. You know, they extremely rare species like nightingales, peregrine falcons, purple emperor butterflies, just beautiful things begin to grow. And actually then it became incredibly popular. People were fascinated. People started coming to visit. They started to make more money than they were previously making. And many other farms are now set upon this similar rewilding project. In fact, David Attenborough has been talking about this idea of rewilding. I think the church needs a rewilding project where I think some churches, and we've been thinking about this, you know, we can try and hold things quite tightly. I think we're thinking a lot around all the different people coming on a Sunday, the different things around kids' work, and, you know, new Christians coming, non-Christians coming, the style of teaching, the kind of worship, keeping everyone happy, working hard to keep bums on seats. And I just think we need to sort of let go of some of the fixed parameters. I've been to so many events where you lead worship and you're given 17 minutes, 30 seconds to lead worship, and I think we need to prayerfully plan and consider, and order in worship is extremely important, as Paul talks about in Corinthians. But I just think we need to hold things much more lightly. I think we need to kill this obsession with excellence. I think we shouldn't do things poorly in a lazy fashion because we can't be bothered. But I think if we're pushing just this incredible elite professional few on a stage, I think we've seen what it brings in terms of a worshiping people. That we can have these great experiences on Sunday in a church, but it's not affecting the choices we're making on a Saturday night in a pub. I think we need to allow more space for the Spirit to speak, more of the prophetic, more space to hear from people in our church. And I think as leaders, we need to be much better at connecting what we're doing with what we're living and how we're living. I think we need to be hearing much more from what does it look like to live your worship as a teacher? What does it look like to live your worship as a student, as a, running a business, working in a hospital? I think these connection points, again, I think so often we put all of this energy into this 1 hour, 30-minute event. And it's often dislocated and disconnected from the world we're living in. So I think in terms of the rewilding, and we'd started to do a few of these things, and I just want to see much more of this, where we would at times move the band off the stage and put the band in the middle of the congregation and have a microphone where other people could come and lead a song. And we saw God do some amazing things, or space for people to come and share prophetic words that could then be appropriately filtered through the Sundays. Or I just think that there's a lot more that needs to be done. The other thing is I just think churches, we really need to get serious about this worship and prayer, which doesn't necessarily happen on that Sunday, but running through our expression throughout the week, points for us to pray and bring stuff before the Lord. And I think one of the things, if we're going to learn from what we've seen in places like Asia and China and the persecuted church, it's interesting, we often get the Americans in to speak at our events, but they've got something that we need, and it's perseverance in prayer, and it's passion. And I think that's what we need in the UK, perseverance in prayer, just an utter devotion to Jesus in prayer. And so I think that's one of the things I see stirring up. But let's not say, oh, great, okay, COVID's finished, death rates are down, back to normal. I think, what does it look like for our churches to be houses of prayer? So that doesn't in any way answer your question, but I just think thinking way more than a brilliant Sunday service, and neat, tidy 4 songs, 30-minute preach, quick prayer, off we go. We've got to create space for God to lead us, to listen, not to be afraid of silence, and to see how our Sundays are propelling us into the week. When the Spirit of God is poured out, what does the Spirit of God do? It propels us out, as it did at Pentecost. I want to see more of that in the church. So that's what I'm thinking about.
That was my conversation with the worship leader and church leader, Tim Hughes. He's based at Gas Street in Birmingham. He's also got a new book out called Why Worship, so why not check that out as well. And as I said at the beginning, that interview was originally published in Premier Christianity magazine. Check out our brand new website and subscribe now at premierchristianity.com. If you've enjoyed the show today, then why not check out our amazing back catalogue of interviews, well over 100 different church leaders, politicians, sports stars, people in the media, all Christians, all with an amazing story to tell of their testimony and what God has done in their life. Get those inspirational interviews and conversations now through The Profile as a podcast. Just search for The Profile wherever you normally get your podcasts from, or head to premierchristianradio.com/The Profile. That's all we got time for this week. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you same time, same place next week. Take care.